why people end up going to stomach. So there's an active motion versus a passive motion.
Sure, why they end up where?
In my clinic, okay, with shoulder problems. So, right, somebody goes, Tay, lay down, arms up for me. Oh, your shoulders are a little tight, we gotta work on that, right? And so what they do, they go like this, and like, all right, relax, come on, stretch them out, stretch, stretch, stretch. Do you think this girl needs any more stretching?
No.
Absolutely not. But look at how big the difference is between how high she can go ahead, and how high I can go. This is the sketchy range. This is where bad stuff happens, right? So this is showing me she has plenty of tissue length, she has plenty of capsular mobility, but if I just like look at her at a glance and like or see her do a back handspring like this is Heather, she puts her arms to like here, and then she hinges with her lower back. So when I see her in her beam skill, I'm like, oh, your shoulders might be tight. And you lay her down, and she's like, oh, she can't lift them up. But if I didn't take the time to look at it, it's a green trapezoid above that. She's 6 inches above the green trapezoid. So she clearly has, look at the angle difference from the first one to the second one. She does not need more stretching. No more, right? And if I stretch her shoulders are gonna become loose and unstable because I'm giving her a range she can't control. She catches an overshoot handstand and her shoulder slides up. Does that make sense? So I can't tell you how many people come to the clinic and they're like, my shoulder's just stiff, right? And they put their arms up and they do like a little back bend and it looks terrible, but you lay them down and you can lift them up to 195 degrees. Or their shoulders move really, really well, almost too much, and their middle back is not moving enough. To do this, you need a lot of things, your lat, your pec, your soft tissue, your middle spine, your core has to be stable. So if you just assume that this is the problem, you stretch, 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 but what if their stiffness is in the thoracic spine because they hollow too much? And you're just cranking on their shoulders. You're taking the shoulder joint, sliding out of the socket. And then that girl goes to do something and it, that's when a problem comes up. So I tried, I'm probably repeating on my slides, I'm just going off the fly, but I separate the girls into who needs more mobility and who does not need more mobility. If you need more mobility, let's do some soft tissue work, let's roll out, we'll do some gentle stretching, we'll get you there. And if you need more control work like her and these other girls, you don't need to do any more stretching. And I think people don't understand the active versus passive. It's very simple to do that. Hands on their middle of their back and just lift them up as high as they can. If they can go to 100, 200 degrees, you don't need any more, right? And I'll show you another one. I'm gonna need you again. But that's very, very, oh yeah, that's Taylor. So Taylor, lay down for me. So lay your back. And I'm gonna show you this. So Taylor had a shoulder problem because she had too much range she couldn't control. And she was doing overshoots, right? So can everyone see this? Right, relax. So this is where the physical therapist hat comes on, so you're not allowed to do this at all, right? But if I put her through ranges of motion, anybody watch like Major League Baseball? Yeah. She has more range than a Major League pitcher, right? And when I put her the other way, she has an arc of motion that's probably over most Major League pitchers. So, and I'm holding her shoulder. This is just shoulder motion. This is not, it's cheating, right? But if I put her like this, she has 90 degrees. She has probably 100 and 200 degrees, right? If I stretch this poor child, I'm gonna dislocate her shoulder. And when she first came to me, because she came from the gym, when I first evaluated her, I could take her shoulder and slide it out of the socket manually. And she would feel it go in and out, right? So she has lots of passive support, but no active support. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's very important to remember because I think we don't do that. And I didn't do that as a younger coach. I was just saw a shoulder angle and I was like, you need to stretch more. But this is more of a problem is that she doesn't know how to access, her brain does not have access to that end range, and she's not strong enough to get back there. And she doesn't have enough control. So when she gets to here, her brain goes, oh yeah, oh, this is unstable, and it reflexively guards against it. It won't let her access her full range of motion because her nervous system is scared. If your brain perceives a threat with a range of motion, it just won't let you do it. It's at a brain stem level, which doesn't happen. So if you're cranking that girl into a range she can't control, and you toss her up with a giant swing, which is 2.5 times your body weight force, it's when your shoulder starts to slide out. That make sense? So it's very, very important to remember. These girls and guys don't need more stretching. Because they have that passive support, it's lacking. Okay, I remember. And like I said, if you stretch her, she's gonna lose flexibility because her brain's gonna guard against it. You can do PNF, you can do foam rolling, you can do the craziest stretch you've ever done in the world. It's gonna give it another day, come back, she'll be tight again. Tighten right back up. Because her brain is giving you the ultimate no thank you. Right? And her brain happily chooses survival over, I want my back handspring to look good. Okay, so that's very important. We're gonna hurt somebody if we try to go anymore. If you take that plus high force skill, high volume, you're gonna beat up someone's shoulder in the process. We talked about that, right? It may not be a mobility problem in the first place, right? Active versus passive. Second of all, if it is a mobility problem, it might not be their shoulder. It could be their middle back, it could be their core. It could be, I've seen girls who come in with wrist extension problems and their handstand looks jacked up and you look at their shoulders like, oh, that shoulder angle, and you just chase the shoulder. But if their wrist can't extend, they can't stack their body weight over, and and that's a problem down here. And you go, look at your wrist, and they go, you go, yeah, wrist problems? Like, yeah, I had wrist surgery. And the problem is down here, it just looks like a shoulder angle. So if they hit the beam, yeah, go ahead.
So can you basically, I guess, I'll call it follow the chain, like if it seems like there's a problem here, you can start.
Yeah. Check marks. I go, any gymnast that walks in my door, whether it's a big toe problem or a pinky toe problem or a shoulder problem, I look at everything, head to toe. How's your neck move? How's your middle back move? How your shoulders move? Elbows, wrists, hips, knees, ankles. Because if same thing with landing mechanics, right? If girls have low back pain when they land because they land hyperextended, but I check their ankles and they have like 10 degrees of ankle mobility, they land stiff and they draw their back. And you're like, oh, you gotta work on your core control and your glutes are not activating right and you're inhibited and all this other shenanigans. I'm like, well, you anyone check her ankle? And she's like, you ever ankle pain? Yeah, Achilles problems, that Seavers is good. Right? Same thing with your wrist. Right? Oh, your shoulder angle. We gotta work your shoulder angle. I'm gonna check your wrist. Because you're hitting the back handspring angle at like negative degrees and you're cranking on your shoulders to get there. Right? So I say these things because we have to make sure we're not assuming things. And even if it's a mobility problem, right? Because girls do have restrictions in this area, right? You do a lot of shoulder work, it does get tight. But it's not only their lats. It's not their lats and their pecs. There's 13 muscles that you have to have extending to get your arm over your head. Teres, pec minor, pec major, posterior capsule, anterior laxity. All those things have to be extending well for you to get your arm over your head. And if you're like, oh, it's a lats, and you put her on a bar and you start stretching her, what if it's her pec minor? Like, and I'll show you with Kara, because that's her situation. So you have to work with a health care provider or someone to look at it, right? But this is really where it comes down to all this before we go into training application. So you take someone who has no passive support. Unfortunately, some coaches push real hard in their flexibility, and they don't train their control work. They just do push-ups and rope climbs and chin-ups. And then you put them in a high force situation under high repetition, 10,000 reps per year maybe. And then you put that person in a rapid growth spurt where their growth plates are open and their bones are growing faster than their tendons can keep up. It's just like absolute recipe for disaster. Like I have 12-year-olds in my clinic who hit a growth spurt and were learning like blind changes or pirouettes. Their shoulder was not ready for one arm loading and their shoulder was like sliding out now. It's because of all these things we're talking about. Does that make sense? Is there any questions on that? Because a lot of that stuff is like, whoa. Yes.
So, ideally, should you, before you even begin this sport, you should kind of have an assessment of flexibility.
Speaking my language, man. I do a full 30-minute assessment on every gymnast that I have every year. I check it, shoulders, wrists, elbows, knees, low back, check for fractures, check for osgood-Schlatters, how's their ankle mobility. All right, if I put, and I just did this on her last week, but I was rechecking to see if she was unstable, and she's getting better. Shoulder hasn't hurt that bad, but she still does 2 times a week her own pre-app program for her shoulders, because they're just inherently unstable. Same thing with her low back, So I suggest, I can do it, I can cheat because I am a healthcare provider, but there are tons of very intelligent healthcare providers out there, and they would love to come in and check out and just do a quick screen.
What title? Under what title?
So I studied under the SFMA system, which is what I learned a lot of. And you can Google SFMA provider. If you're local, I'll do it for you. SFMA, Selective Functional Movement Assessment. Anybody who has intelligent background in movement can do this stuff for you. And like, have you seen this girl's shoulder? Like, whoa, caution, right? Low back fractures, ankle problems, all that stuff. Our injury rate dropped in half in the last year, 50%, from 39 injuries to 17. Because I think we started to be better about training and adapting individual strength programs to these girls that need it. Yes?
Is it also true for boys that they probably have more flexibility that they need?
Absolutely, yeah. Because same thing with the guys tend to get natural selection if they get picked up as Gumby when they're little. I think they start to lose their flexibility when we don't do enough preventative care and they get tight or they grow fast. Guys typically tend to be more in the mobility category where they need more mobility, but there's ways to do that without just stretching. Soft tissue work, if you get a good movement assessment and somebody can just spend an hour with them and like kind of work manual therapy on one, retest the motion, work on this one, you can find the one area or muscle that's probably the most problematic and you can just snipe that one out versus being like, let's try all these different mobility exercises. And I get emails about that all the time, like, my kid has this and this wrong. I'm like, what can I do? Like, I have no idea. Because they're just sitting in front of me and I test and retest. Like, if I give you the wrong thing, I'm gonna hurt you. If it's your pec and I give you a lat exercise, I haven't fixed the problem. I'm making this worse because this is probably already too mobile. So there's a lot of things it could be, but boys typically tend to be more mobility driven because of how much upper body volume they do. But I see a lot of people who have emails about the same thing. They're just very mobile young kids, that have problems. Because they do a lot of extension work, P-bars, rings, and all that stuff. So they have more tissues they just can't control their full range. Good. But it can be both. It can be either or. Again, I don't know until I assess somebody. So moving on, team up. And this is another big one for me, is like, don't be afraid to safely put weight in a kid's hand. Because what we were talking about in the last lecture with the warm-up and the Achilles one, people are like, well, if you use weight, you're gonna hurt the kid, right? Because it's too much loading for their system. I'm like, do you realize the floor is 17 times their body weight? It's ridiculous how high the forces are. They're already getting loaded, and the problem is that they can't handle it. The forces are more than their body can handle, and that's why the tissue gets damaged. Right, so training and using weights safely and progressively with good technique is a way to bridge the gap between you can take this much, but gymnastics is this much. Okay, if we go through a strength program, now we have a buffer that's lower. Right, now you can take a little bit more, got more in the tank to work with before you start to break down. So we do a ton of strength training with weights and kettlebells, which I'll show you, and no one has yet to become a She-Hulk or like lose their flexibility or their leaps. They're still just as mobile, clearly, right? But Taylor can deadlift half her body weight, right? She can do a Turkish get-up with very heavy weight for her proportional body. So we're not, if you do it safely, and I work with great strength coaches, Brian, a couple of my friends up in the North Shore, and they've taught me the right way. We taught them the technique over a month or so, and the girls just know it now. They just know how to work with kettlebells, they know how to work with weight safely, with good technique, and I'm on them all the time. Knee out, go that way, shoulder here, don't do that. Go down in the weight, you're falling apart. That's what good coaching is about. But we have to be okay with putting weight in their hands, because it's the only way they're gonna get stronger. It's not all about just gymnastics specific work. You have to be able to load them. And our girls weightlift once a week. They go to a gym with barbells and get Olympic weightlifting. They're awesome. Yes.
So, I guess a safer way to, I guess, to address the problems that are going on, just be really to bring your body to a full range of motion. Not with a lot of weight, but with something that's heavy enough to bring it through,
right,
without necessarily forcing it.
Right. So you got to get full range of motion first, full controlled range of motion actively, and then once you get full active control, then you can start to load it if the technique is right. Right. So the perfect example is like this. We'll show you a drill that I use. Right. So if her passive limit is way up there, but her active limit is there, I'm gonna have her put her hands up on a panel mat up to her, just about her flexibility passive limit, and have her start to work on picking her arms up. Because that's how her brain neurally starts to access that range of motion. And then when she gets good at it, I put a floor bar in her hand. And then when she gets better at it, I put a 2-pound weight on it. Or we have her do like a little weighted stick bar lift. And you can slowly get the brain to pick up on how to use the motion, and then you just go and you teach it like all of us do as coaches. When you swing your arms, I really want you to feel your shoulder blades feel like they're gonna burn off the back of your chest, because that's full range of motion. You know what I mean? And then in terms of loading for any other strength exercise, like we do like a half kneeling press. You show me a good half kneeling press, good technique, hips are under, butt's tight, press, full range of motion, good. 5-pound weight. That's what you're starting with in the summer. First week, 5 pounds. 3 weeks of that, then 10 pounds. 3 weeks of that, maybe 2 more pounds, maybe 5 more pounds. And to the point where they really struggle. That's when you get to that edge of ability is when your system adapts. That's how your brain adapts. It has to be challenged to adapt. Because if we never challenge them with weight safely, that's what strength conditioning is. Safely adapting the system in a controlled manner. So that when you kick them off to do blind change, they have a 1-arm stacked column reference to go to. That's why we do Turkish get-ups on every blind change day. So it's essentially a 1-arm stack.
So it sounds like we're kind of working backwards.
I am. I'm working backwards, so
No,
eventually
not
I
you,
can
I
move
mean,
forwards. Oh, we are.
Coaches generally work
Sometimes.
backwards, want to use the big muscles instead of.
Yeah. Sometimes we just
stabilize.
we just throw these kids into level 7 and start working pirouettes, and then the system gets overloaded, and that's why they end up in my office. But we don't have any way to bridge the gap. All right. So think brain. Think movement-wise. This is one of our girls. So just think in terms of shoulder. Don't think gymnastics. Right? So I saw 4 distinctly different things happening to the shoulder. And I'll show you what I mean. This is how my nerdy brain works. Right? So in terms of, I saw a top 2-arm compression, right? And I think that transfers over to some of these side-loaded drills that I'll show you.
You can't say so.
Oh, is this better? Sorry, so I saw a 2-arm compression right on top of the giant, and I see some of these drills on the side. I see this shoulder angle that I really want to see with this mat left off. And then I see a 2-arm hanging traction, hanging forces, which is what we do a shoulder blade drill that I'm going to show because we don't have a bar. This is one of Tay's pre-dap programs. But just hanging and working on scapular circles from the high bar. And we do this as a pre-dap station a lot. So it's like swing your long hang, go do a back central with a handstand with blind, go to the wall and do a hold for a drill, hang on 5 circles, then come back, chalk up, get back in line. Right? And just 5 circles front and back, but we're preparing her shoulders to handle that elongation force, right? So you see up top and the bottom are there, and then I also see, because it was a blind full, one arm on her left, right? I see these maybe little prehab isolated wide drills we use a lot, and I also see a Turkish get up, because her arm is on one hand loaded, and if you literally just flip her upside down, it's a blind change. You see what I mean? So we're slowly starting to prepare the shoulder complex to handle load, so that when she does swing, there's something there to hang on actively. It's not just hoping her shoulder survives. I think a lot of girls survive optional gymnastics. I don't think they actually get through. I'm serious. Whoever's the most durable, right? Overhead carries we do a ton of, right? Get the weight, press it up, and just walk up and down the floor. Because when you're walking like this with the weight in your hand, your shoulder's just like all over the place, and your brain's like, whoa, I gotta figure this out, right? But that's how the golf ball is sliding around the tee, and your brain's figuring out automatically how to do it. My opinion is that when you have a millisecond to catch a handstand for an overshoot, it doesn't matter how many pull-ups you did. It's how fast can you turn it on and prepare yourself for load. So we do pull-ups, we do push-ups, we do rope climbs, we do all that stuff. But we also do a ton of this stuff too. Because in the moment, you just gotta have it automatically at a reflexive level. And that's how you do it with a kettlebell carry. Because if the weight's overhead and you're just like I'll fire my left trap 30%. That's not how it works. It just happens. That make sense? So we do these loading drills to make it automatic.
Do you have sort of like a list or a way
Yeah,
of getting
coming
the
up.
drills?
That's coming up. I'm like prepping everybody, right? It's like, oh, just show me, just show me. That's coming right now. This is coming right now. But the thing for me is like, if I had just showed you the drills, none of them would have made sense. Like, oh, that was cool, drill to Congress, but you wouldn't have understood why it's important. Why we don't want to stretch Taylor and give her just a heavy kettlebell instead. Because whenever we stretch, I have her go through her range of motion lightly, and then she does prehab work at the end of the workout. She doesn't stretch crazy anymore. Versus somebody else who is a little bit stiff, I have them work on foam roller stuff, don't go near the kettlebells. Because if I put you a weight over your head, your arm goes terrible. We're gonna just, all right, switch.